Okay, thank you. Glasses will help. Hello, this is Eureka Springs Parks and Recreation Commission workshop. Today is Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022, 6:10 p.m. And we have an informal list of things to talk about, I know, which I have not brought up in my phone yet. Scott,
You want me to go ahead?
if you want to start, that'd be fine. I'll catch up with you.
The first item we were going to address was we were going to have a discussion with Sandy Formica of the Watershed Conservation Resource Center to answer some questions about the grant that we appear to have been awarded. I say appear to because, as I've mentioned in the past, it still has to be funded by the EPA, and they did request that she make a couple of changes to her pro forma. They needed to cut out, I think it was about $20,000, so that leads me to believe that they just axed a few items, and I did send each of you the new attachment to that grant. So the version that I sent to you a few days ago is the most recent, but she will not be here this evening to answer any questions. We'll see about getting her to the next workshop.
Okay.
The second thing, and related, was you might recall we had retained the Watershed Conservation Resource Center initially to do some consulting in lake and water quality issues, and it was their work, Sandy's predominantly, which has resulted in the potential for this grant, and also the work that the NRCS is doing. We do have a meeting with the NRCS Thursday, which they called, so that's good news.
Good.
And by the way, it may be that there's duplicates. If we do get a grant through the NRCS, it may be that significant portions of this other grant become moot. We don't know until we find out what, if anything, we will have from them. But the funds that we had allocated, which was $10,000 for that contract, are up. Initially, I was going to ask about renewing it. I know that can't be, that would require a vote of the commission, which we can't do tonight. But it did occur to me, and I spoke with Ruth today about we do have money in the budget for professional services, and I could, without a vote of the commission, pay any additional sums that we might have with the WCRC through that account, or we could authorize a specific sum again, like the $10,000. So I just mentioned that tonight to see what kind of direction we might want to go in. Do we want to allocate a specific amount again, or just as the need arises, I could pay for their services through the professional services account?
It would be good to hear from Sandy and find out what she would propose doing with an extra $10,000, so we're all clear on what is happening,
Right.
what the steps are.
Right. And what it would be is, it would be things like what we're talking about now. If we get this grant, there's management of the grant that has to take place. And so it would be those sorts of things. But it did come up in the context of when Sam Dudley was here at our last meeting, and he was talking about possibly a bridge upstream of the lake. It occurred to me that that's the very thing that the WCRC would be assessing as part of this grant, and that at a minimum we should have them weigh in on the area where a bridge like this would go, because how is this going to affect the stream bed? It's close enough to the area of these, what I'd call wetlands, that where the old bridge used to be, that it could have an impact. And so it would be things like that, getting their input on that particular area where this bridge goes. You know, would it have any negative impacts on the stream bed? So it would be that type of thing that we would potentially use her for. And the third possibility is we don't do anything at this point, and if something comes up again like that, where I feel that we need to retain the WCRC's services, then I have to bring it to the commission for a vote at that time. So we have three potentials there, so.
It seems to me like that item on the budget being professional consultation, it wasn't intended for you to ask us every time you used it,
Right.
but it was
Right.
accounting fees, legal fees, things that were more normal and more regular. Maybe if, like Sue brought that up, like she wanted to have some more information, maybe it should be
Yeah,
talked about.
sure.
And maybe there's a dollar amount, but no, it's not going to be a small dollar amount anyway if she asks for, if you need money, so.
Yeah, last time it was $10,000. I mean, we knew there would be a lot of work. Now, well, if we do get the grant, there is a lot of work managing the grant, but those fees are actually built into the grant.
Built into the grant, right.
Right. So, so in reality, it would be things like what I'm talking about now. We're going to contemplate putting a bridge in upstream of this sensitive area, getting a consultant's opinion on whether that's a good idea or not. So it would be that type of thing. But yeah, it was on the informal agenda because she had intended to be here. She only called about 2 hours ago. Something came up, and I did suggest that she could appear telephonically, but she indicated she would really rather be here.
Yeah, we can ask
So-
her questions.
So I told her we had plenty of time. We'll do it next time
Okay.
around.
Well, since we have plenty of time, why don't we go ahead and wait then
Yeah.
to bring up the, y'all think so?
Sounds good.
Okay. The next thing I see is we have a note about discussing the master plan process. Sue, we have your name listed on there as a
Yeah.
champion for that. You want to give us some ideas or give us some information?
Yeah, Jonathan's just arrived.
Oh, sorry,
Give him
Jonathan.
a
Hi.
minute to get settled.
My reading glasses on, I can't see past 2 feet in front of me. Okay. So Jonathan's here at 6:17. Jonathan Tigan. Okay.
Yeah, so we have been talking for a long time about a master planning process, and this was under Kevin, and I really want to thank Kevin for seeing the need for this and starting the process. And we have voted on a number of actions to get assessments. Part of it is working through Sandy and the grants she's gotten us. Part of it is Croft and Tell, who are doing some assessment around the more used areas of Lake Leatherwood. And I think this is all really good, important work. But even though I've been involved in this for a year now, I'm not really clear of the process. I'm not sure if this master plan we're talking about is just Lake Leatherwood or if it is all of the areas covered by parks. So there's just a lot of questions, and I'm not aware of any kind of mechanism to move this process forward. It was basically just came from Kevin. So, and now we found out that at least one of those assessments may not be available until around 2026, which is a long way out, which I don't think necessarily stops us from doing master planning, but it's something that needs to be thought out. There needs to be some kind of process how we can make these decisions. And so I just wanted to put it on the table to see what the other commissioners thought, if they had experience working on master planning, not on actually what goes in the master plan, but how we move the process forward. Obviously, this is going to be the body that makes the major decisions, but how do decisions get brought up to the point where they can be voted on is kind of my question.
I think.
And Ruth, I particularly want to hear from you because I know now you're chair, so I don't know if you've thought of this process.
Well, I think we need a committee, and I know at one time Kevin brought up some things about committees, and we've talked about them on and on. There's quite a few of the old committees that we have not really kept up with. That part of it's COVID, part of it's just changes that have happened. I think it's helpful to have the Master Planning Committee, the Trails Committee, these active committees that can do the work, like you said, and then bring the information to the commission, and then we can make an informed vote or decision, whatever. But the committees with specific goals, such as the master planning, the trails, I think that would be really, and the master planning as part of that could also be, outreach. They could be part of how do we get the community involved, which seems to, obviously that's something people want, we know that.
Yes, yeah, no, that's a
And-
definitely important point.
And then some of the things, like you said, with that information, well, not having specific information doesn't always affect your actual master plan, because your master plan can say things like you need assessments, and it's a living document and it will change anyway, so.
Yeah, and we know it's coming, so we can have in the document what we do when that information becomes available, what the process then would be to look at that information and maybe amend the plan as necessary.
I think that's what's always been a problem, too, is people hear the word master plan and they think we've just got this set in stone thing, and why we haven't created a new master plan the next year, a new master plan. We've just never been quite, and I say never, I really think never, really clear on what our process, we've changed it so much, and we've changed the name of it. It's just, there's a master, we have a master plan for Lake Leatherwood. We have a master plan for all the parks. We have a master plan for trails. We have work plans for this. You know, the word master plan, what do we really mean by this? We even, prior to all of y'all, looked into hiring a consulting firm in Fayetteville and started budgeting and looking for budgeting money to spend a lot of money to pay someone to do the master plan. And they came and talked to us, and that process ended up being so involved and so expensive, really. I thought, that's way beyond what we need and so bringing it back in-house and trying to handle it ourselves, but it's always just been, we don't know what we're doing half the time. Which is why we tried to hire professionals before. We felt like we didn't know what we were doing. So I think getting the committee going again, reaching out to professionals to help us, and
Yeah, well, I totally agree. I think there should be a master plan. First off, a master plan is useless if it's not a living document. It has to be constantly changing, and that's fine. There should be a master plan for short-term and for long-term for every single one of our parks. And I mean, how do you know that you need to go after grant money for certain things unless it's on a wish list that makes sense to go after things? So there should be that plan. And that should be a priority as far as I'm concerned.
well, and that brings up a point that there was a long time ago, some of the master plans, is that Chris Fisher out there? And he's been around a long time too. You know, some of the master plans years ago looked more like just wish lists. And I say master plans, the pieces and parts of master planning.
And there should be wish lists.
And there's wish lists, but that's not all there is to it. And sometimes we would get just these wish lists going, and other times we would just get lists of real specific things that need to be done. And other times we come up with vague things. It's like we haven't really ever, there is an actual plan. We know that. You can read it, you can look it up, you can see where it's been worked on. But I think it needs it's time to do it again, to bring
I
it
think
up
if
again.
you don't do that, you're always reacting.
Yeah.
You're always reacting to something today
And how
because
do you prioritize any of it? For example, just from me sitting here looking, we have Basin Park, which has all these big issues and money that's going to have to go to that. And you've got things going on at Leatherwood and all of the springs. Some master plan has got to create what are our priorities in here, where you're going to budget this money, because we obviously are not just flowing with abundance of money. So sometimes the master plan has got to prioritize it in that short term and then in the long term, looking out at revenues, future revenues, what can we afford to do? If we put all this money into Leatherwood, does Basin Park just cave in, or vice versa? We got to come up with some priority list at least that can be ever-changing, and looking at grants and all those kinds of things.
They can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. And looking at grants and all that can feed into each one of those things, but it does seem like there needs to be a little bit of a footprint that looks 5 years out even and says, okay, right now, this is our priority. We have to focus budget money on this for this period of time.
Sounds like you're ready to volunteer for the committee, right?
No. I'm on Finance Committee.
Oh, that's right.
Man,
Yes.
you might recall I had asked that the commission consider appointing a planning committee, a master planning committee, a few months ago. That didn't happen at the time, but what I was looking for was, because we had all of these different directions we were going in, assessing this, assessing that, I felt that we really needed to sort of build the table of contents, decide what chapters would go into the master plan, and that really should be a committee process that then presents it to the commission for final approval. Because there are going to be different components of this, there's some now, we're working on the Glade project, and thanks to Chris Fisher and other Others who have been, Stephen Dickey, for instance, who have been volunteering, we're making a lot of progress. We should have things there that would become part of a master plan very soon. In fact, already we have components that could be plugged right in there. And so to me, that's what we need, is decide what are the elements going to be. And then some of them, like what are we going to do with that lake? That will take 2 or 3 years of planning and assessment. But that doesn't mean that if we get, well, I'm working on that master or natural resources preservation plan, for instance. That should be part of the master plan. Well, if that's done and ultimately approved by this commission, then that becomes one of those chapters. So I really do believe we need a commission, a committee to decide, make recommendations to the commission who will ultimately decide what elements will go into that plan, and then start plugging them in as we get them.
I think it's the way to go. I think that, it's not just a master planning committee, it's a planning committee in general. I know we have financial, there's some planning issues with financial, but this is master plan plus prioritizing parks, all these things. And with the end goal being, we come up with a master plan eventually, and also and maybe even creating a system where you constantly integrate the new things into the plan and evaluate it. That there's not a system for that either, and that could be part of the committee's goal. I agree. So I guess we need to work on that. So do we have to do that in a meeting? Probably.
Yes, it would need to be a vote, so I could get it on the agenda for the
That's
next
true.
meeting.
Okay.
Yes?
Yes, put it on the agenda. That'd be great. Phil, I think so. I think it'd be a good idea to talk about it. And I know this is kind of off topic, but I want to make sure I mention what Pat, because she couldn't make it, me a little email about the meetings before I forget to say it. She really thinks we should talk about at some point setting some structured time, goals of how much time we spend on our meetings. So maybe before the next meeting, we can have some conversations about that too, whether the meetings are always end at 7:30, whether they always end at 8, or whatever we do. 5 minutes for this, 10 minutes for that. I think so too, and I think I brought it up before. I think, so between now and the next meeting, I'm going to we'll work on that, and just remind me, Scott, to get that on the agenda too. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to know when we're going home, but we've had some workshops and meetings that have been really short, and then other times there's just more to be dealt with. And I mean, I think we can look to putting things off, but if decisions need to be made, then I think we have to make those decisions.
I mean, I've been on lots of different committees and things that have times, and you don't always stick to it, but for the most part, if you have something, it does help you to be more efficient sometimes, and it helps you to wrap things up.
Yeah.
So I like it.
Well, I think one of the issues with that, though, is, as we have on item number 4, we've got some minor trail realignment issues. And, of course, Ruth, you know that you and I had some discussions that you indicated, well, we don't need a vote of the commission for such a minor thing as, like the trail reroutes.
Right.
There's 3 of them that are collectively less than 300 feet, and that should be something that a director and staff can do without having a vote of the commission. And so that's, I guess, when we talk about the length of the meetings, it's how much do we have to pack into an agenda? If, in fact, the commission wants to be involved in decisions such as a 75-foot long trail reroute, then our meetings are going to become longer. Now, and in our last meeting, there was discussions about wanting to be out, actually go out and see things, and that's fine. No issues with that. But I guess the question is, at what point do you want the director to come and seek commission approval? Because the description of how that works is rather vague. It says something.
It is very vague.
It says something along the lines of anything out of the ordinary course of business or something.
Yeah, out of the ordinary. And then there's mentions of if trails are minor things are done for safety, and there's a couple different things I've read that say that it should be the director, because you should be able to make those decisions on the fly, so to speak, if something's flooded and you've got people out there, or whatever. These are decisions that should be in your purview. Don't have to be on our agenda, but
Right.
we still need to be informed and know about them. that's one thing with the Trails Committee can help with that, too.
Well,
That could be that could be where the information, that same with the public who wants to be involved and wants to know, and,
right, the
you know,
Trails Committee, as you say, I mean, that was, that's the whole purpose for that. And the things that we're doing trail-wise, that's the perfect place to discuss it. And then those of you that were on the commission back when we still had a Trails Committee would recall that they would come in and give just an update, just like the director gives an update. And then that's how you become informed. Of course, you can go to the meetings as well. But they're able to get a lot more into depth about the discussions and do we realign this trail, or do we close this parking lot, or what have you, than what it would take in a commission meeting.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of whether the commission actually votes, I think there's a big advantage to having it come before the commission, because you can get some more input here. You can also a way to put it out to the public. And I'd really encourage you, even some of these smaller trails, it's really good to get different perspectives. Because I was thinking, I think there's a story trail. I was thinking, oh, that isn't needed because it's right by the new trail from the bridge. And said, oh, yes,
the slow
there
ride.
is a need, yeah, slow, is that what it, what's it
Slow
called?
ride.
Slow ride. There really is a use for that because it's bikes are not on there.
Yeah.
So, whatever ultimate decision is made, it's good to have these things brought to our attention so you can take those into account when decisions are made. So I would really encourage you to put things out there as much as possible and get as much feedback before those final decisions are made.
that's what the Trails Committee was really helpful with doing, and that's why I think that's exactly what it does. It's hard to get all that stuff packed into a meeting, and we had a Trails Commission. I mean, they did a great job of doing that and then getting us the information, and they had plenty of time to discuss it and coalesce it into a report of some sort.
Well, the issue is that I hear from, and I would hope that some of those commissioners would speak up now, but I hear from some commissioners that they say, look, this is way too much. These meetings are going too long. You don't need to bring these things to
We don't
us.
need this stuff at a meeting,
And
right?
then there are others that I know err on the side of, no, we want to know about all these things. So we need to know where those lines are.
Well, I can tell you from my perspective, and it's just my perspective, so everybody has their own, but you are in a position, you have a job to do. It's your job. We're paid you to do it. We trust that you can do your job. You have a trails person that's paid to do their job. They know what they're doing. Who am I to decide whether that's the right thing or the wrong thing in these kinds of decisions? You guys are paid to do this. You're knowledgeable about it way more than any of us. So if it's putting a brand new trail in, that's a whole different thing. Or if it's, building a new bridge, that's another thing. But rerouting them to less than 250 feet of trail, or, weeding one section versus another section. I just don't think every single one of those daily decisions should come before us. It's my humble opinion.
It's a
But-
good opinion. And like you said, so putting a new bridge in, that is a commission decision, but not how we put the bridge in. That's what the Parks Department does with the trails experts and things like that. We make the decision of whether you should do it or not, or whether it's okay to do it. It's not the actual, it's his function as a Parks Director, like you said, to do his job.
I think
I pretty much agree.
If there are budget items like building a bridge, things like that really require some, then I think it should come to us. There's an old business acronym, RAA, Responsibility, Accountability, and Authority. And we can't hold you to any one of these unless we give you the other two things. If you're going to be responsible, you should be accountable, and you should have the authority to make a decision.
Exactly.
And that's what you're talking about in these short reroutes of trails. That's just keeping the trail system functioning. That's all. It's not it's just keeping them functioning. And I think that we're doing a disservice to the community to keep them not operable because we're waiting on us to make decisions.
Yes,
So,
I think so too.
Yeah. So I'm interested, Scott, to know what are the trail routes that make that 250 feet?
Okay. Sam? I think I can see you out there.
I think he was
Is that-
napping.
Sam Dudley actually is here, and we'll describe those to you. And you had a handout as well, correct?
Are we boring you?
Thank you. That's very thrilling.
It's thrilling. thank you.
Oh, I like this.
Thing, I guess it's.
Oh, that's the parking thing.
Switchbacks are done.
Yes, that is where the park is.
Oh, good.
There's already some room
Thanks,
up
Ed.
there.
Thanks.
It would free up. Yeah,
Where is it?
frees up the ball fields. This is the top of the
Okay.
trails. Like right here is 187 that shoots off towards Beaver Lake.
These are the parking issues. Did you have one
Yeah,
on
this
the?
is a separate,
I like this.
this is a separate document, but the
Well,
trail, were those, was I supposed to print those, or were those emailed out?
No, we got
Trail
them in email.
realignments? Okay, cool.
There's pictures, we saw pictures. So if you want to just
Oh, the flood.
briefly tell us about the
Yeah, I mean, the
trail
Shoreline
reroutes.
Trail's pretty obvious.
Tell Sue.
It's just like, if you start from the marina, there's a couple of spots, they're just mud pits. The lake is, there's a draw that comes down where the water comes down, and there's no trail left. Man, I'm like too tall for this microphone. There we go, okay. So essentially, I was just going to reroute about 70, 80 feet of trail, keep it up higher a little bit, and then reconnect it. It's not too big a deal. Just a couple of cedar trees that might need to be removed, or at least, limbed or lopped or whatever. That's about it.
That's it.
So-
Do you have to close them for any length of time?
No,
to do this?
these
You
are
just
these
couldn't
would
do
be
this?
news.
These
I
are-
mean, yeah, it's
Yeah.
like,
So this is not in your packet that we got the last meeting, right? This is something separate?
yeah, yeah. And then what I have down for number 2. Sorry, I'm pulling this up on
Number
my
2
phone.
is the parking.
Hobo Holler one.
Oh, yeah.
There's this, it's hard to describe unless you've been out there, but essentially both entrances to the trail are kind of, they're easiest to approach from the same direction, if that makes sense. Usually when you have like a trail like this that connects into another trail, you want users coming from this direction to be able to come in from that direction, users from this direction come in from that. Instead, it's like you kind of have to wrap around, and then it kind of makes the entrance hidden to a lot of people. So this is just a quick little 60-foot reroute or so to make it to where it comes in, and keeps those two trails separated for longer periods of time, which is nice because the Standing Rock Trail is more just kind of gentle hiking, and then the other one is more
I'm
You know.
sorry, I'm not clear where the Standing Rock Trail is.
Standing Rock Trail. It's at Black Bass.
Okay.
It's that little.
Okay, I'm sorry, I hadn't made the switch.
Yeah, so just essentially take out that last sharp switchback on the Hobo Holler Trail and just kind of realign it to where it goes straight into it and make it a little bit easier to see for everybody. And then the third one was the DH7 Miners Rock multi-use trail. I don't know if has anyone seen the end of DH7 down there where it's like the two really, Sue, you might have noticed it, the super sharp switchbacks at the end that feed you into the Miners Rock Trail.
Yeah.
You can't see them on that. They're too sharp, like the GPS didn't even pick them up, so you can't really tell. But essentially, I would just be taking those two out and then making it kind of merge at a more reasonable grade, so that people riding the DH Trail don't. You can't slow down on that feature or else you're going to wreck. So it's like, okay, you don't want it to merge at a place where people can't slow down. I mean, just.
Yeah, I have
duh.
seen it, and I agree something needs to be done there.
Yeah, it's sort of like, okay, come on, guys.
Okay.
Not sure what they were thinking when they built that. So those are the three that I was referring to.
I think they
there.
were just not thinking of hikers. So.
Oh, yeah, I know, right? Yeah. I was redoing those switchbacks on Miners Rock, and I was like, man, yeah, these are really hard to do anything on. Like, I felt like I was about to tip my machine over because the berms were so steep. So those are way less scary now and easier to hike on. So,
Good.
yeah. So those are the three reroutes. Do you guys need to give approval? I mean, obviously this is a workshop, so you can't vote,
We
but
just wanted to
sort of
know.
explaining things.
We were talking about, no, we just wanted to know.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. Anything else on the parking thing?
Well, yeah, the parking thing is a bigger issue.
Definitely.
The reroutes are sort of just something that Scott wanted me to present to you guys. Just, hopefully in the future, when you guys see the reroutes and the way they're done, potentially we don't need to have this sort of a meeting to do it. I mean, I'll get approval from Scott, of course, but not that I'm opposed to you guys knowing. Obviously, you're going to find out regardless, but
Yeah,
I just,
he'll be
Yeah.
your boss, and you can be on the Trails Committee, and y'all can talk about it there.
yay.
Yay.
Yay. Okay, so the parking areas, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the top parking lot where the shuttles turn around to drop riders off. Jonathan, I know you are. Sue, you probably
Yeah.
are. I'm not sure who else. Ruth, you are. So they started back with the other trails manager, Herman Owens, our last trails manager. He kind of started a project where he was going to create a parking lot up there. And they've done a lot of the work on it, but I mean, if that's what you want to call it. But it's not very functional at this point, and we closed it off about a year ago. What I'd like to do is explore reopening it for a variety of reasons. I think obviously it gives more parking in a place that is severely lacking in parking areas. You know, Weatherwood's got, 1,600 acres, and there's 2 places to park. It's like,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
And there's a lot of people that complain about mountain bikers taking up all the parking.
Yeah.
We just need more parking somewhere.
Yeah, and, you know, a specific type of mountain biker, too, is people who are coming for a certain type of experience, AKA the DH mountain bikers are kind of, you know, they're here to do something that's, you know, doesn't really get along too well with other park users. So essentially creating another parking lot up at the top kind of segregates those users
You
from,
wanted to put the downhill riders just park up top and jump on the shuttle at the top?
yeah, so essentially they would park, they would ride down once, and then the shuttle would meet at the bottom, and they'd pay for their tickets, or, you know, they could,
Or you
Yeah.
ride back up?
yeah, essentially, yeah, exactly.
Or not.
This,
More pedal back up?
and this accomplishes a couple of things that we've talked about for a year or so now. That first of all, it helps to alleviate a parking issue by all of the downhill bikers will be parking up top rather than down at the ball fields. So especially when there's an event, like a soccer event, down at the ball fields, it will not be an issue anymore. So that's one of the big issues. That, and the other thing is the downhill bikers oftentimes are a different demographic than some of the other park users. And,
Certainly.
you know, it lets them do what they do up there and lets other park users, you know, do what they do. And not that there won't be any commingling, but the point is it keeps them up in a different area and alleviates some, you know, the parking issues that we have.
Were they going to tailgate parties and stuff up there?
Well, yeah, I was
Not really,
trying
I'm
to be
kidding.
polite. and not- Yeah. So anyway, so it does accomplish a couple of those sorts of things that we've actually talked for at least a year about doing this.
How many spaces does this add?
We were guessing, just based off our initial analysis and going through it, about 25 to 30 parking spaces. So
would certainly
there's
help
some
a lot.
photos that I added. You can see there's the turnaround spot that was initially created, and we could create about 15 to 20 there, depending on what we end up doing. You know, you always have to factor in that a lot of the vehicles that come up there are going to be bigger vehicles with, you know, bike racks and stuff like that. Good news is, you know, we're not going to take any trees down that
A lot of them will be
essentially,
like
I mean, they're,
four-wheel drives who don't mind squeezing into weird places, too.
that's true, yeah, for sure.
And I think the downhill riders were like being by themselves, too. They don't have to worry about parking next to the hikers and worrying about people in there. I think they'll like being segregated up there.
Yeah,
As a
I think
downhill
that's,
biker, I can confirm.
yeah, that's one of the biggest, you know, issues with our current system is right now they're parking at the ball fields, and, you know, there's a lot of confusion, and also about where they go and how they get to where they need to be, and then also the conflict with the mountain bikers and the general park users. You know, it's sort of forcing an issue that we don't need to force, in my opinion. We could easily, you know, get there'll be weekends where we might have to have some overflow parking down at the ball fields, but in general, it should be able to be self-contained, so.
Yeah. So the proposed parking area itself and the access to that, is that under Parks control? Mm-hmm. It's Parks
Yeah,
property
it's Parks property.
up until you get to 23,
23?
the road?
Oh,
Are we
62, you mean?
Yeah, it's 60.
Oh, 62, yeah, sorry, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
no.
yeah.
I was like, that's a long ways.
Yeah, sorry, no, 62, yeah.
Yeah, 62, yeah, it's all ours. I mean, yeah, we're not going to build anything too close to the road anyway.
No, but I
yeah.
mean, we're not going over anybody else's property.
No, we went up there and looked, and Scott has some plat maps that he showed me, and yeah, I've checked with the Trailblazers and everything, so.
We checked the survey.
Okay, great. And then how will this, or will it affect shuttle operations, our ability to collect shuttle fees?
Not at all.
No, I don't think so. I mean, if anything, it'll make the shuttles more efficient because there won't be that confusion over ball fields versus,
Yeah,
like where do you meet them, where do you pick them up? Shuttle drivers can focus simply on,
Sounds good.
picking people up and,
Yeah. So I had heard there was concern that that would somehow make it harder to collect fees or easier for people to do their own shuttles. Is that an issue?
yeah, and Scott and I have talked about, at least presenting to you guys potentially a self-shuttling fee for cars, because like right now there's not one of those, and so self-shuttlers come, they ride the trails, they don't pay anything, they leave, and they kind of are a little bit of a pain because they oftentimes will block certain, lanes of traffic that the shuttles need to get through. So we talked about at least getting a fee of like about $30 to.
Well, this parking.
How do we enforce that, though?
Well, on weekend, you're not going to get everybody, but on weekends, if there's people self-shuttling, the shuttle drivers themselves can check in. I think most people would be these aren't people who are hurting for money.
No, they ride $7,000 bikes.
Yeah, they're on,
Yeah.
$40,000 worth of bikes on the back of their car.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to be like, oh, no, I'm not paying $30, especially if they know it's going towards trail
And
maintenance.
the
so.
self-shuttle is a question whether the old parking way or the new parking way, that's irrelevant to the self-shuttle part. I think that's something that's going to be a system you have to work out either way.
Yeah, and people are self-shuttling anyway at the moment.
Right, we have to figure out a way to control it or deal with it.
Right now, it's more kind of a pain because there's not a system for self-shuttlers,
No.
yet they're still doing it
We'll make
because
a
we
system.
can't.
Well, and that's something,
Enforce
Yeah, we'll
it.
make a system.
that
We'll
is
vote on
something
it.
that's on the agenda for us to discuss
Discuss at
later.
the meeting. Good.
Oh, at this meeting?
But,
No.
Jonathan, since you asked, we very well probably will institute a wristband situation for the self-shuttlers, where, in essence, anyone who's using the downhill trails is going to be paying for using the trails, and then if they use the shuttle too, then they're paying to use the shuttle.
Well, once again, we can't go into charging for the trails themselves.
Well-
You're charging for the parking area, the use of
Call
the,
it a use fee, we can
yeah. You start getting into
We can
legal issues if you charge
argue
for
labels.
trails.
So we legally cannot charge for use of the trails?
Yeah, as a public
Which-
park, yeah.
Yeah. Which
It gets
sounds
us into a
fine.
bunch of liability issues too, if people,
Yeah,
yeah.
then
I
you start saying,
understand
then,
that,
now, if I, as a public, just want to go walk a trail, you're going to charge me to walk the trail. I mean, that's, to
No.
me, it's all the same. How do you
Yeah,
charge
that's true.
somebody to ride downhill? And that's a fee, but I can walk every one of them, and it's no fee. So it's either a fee for everybody or a fee for nobody
Yeah.
in terms of that.
Yeah, and the self-shuttling, it does get a little, I mean, it's like I said, we can't police it, but it's one of those gray areas where you're like, okay,
like, hey,
if we ask
please
for
give
$30 from people, they'll probably give it to us, but
Yeah,
if they don't, we can't really get them, and
Well,
it's like
you-
we can call the police necessarily,
I
or
don't think
know
you'll
if we
know
can.
till you'll have to find a way to,
Yeah,
if you're going to have a rule about it, you need to find a way to at least act like you're policing it, or,
yeah.
Well, and we.
We'll have
we-
signage.
And you'll have a system for
We
it,
have
yeah.
ideas on that, like
Good.
a self-opening gate where their wristband has a barcode.
That's
that,
good.
They can't get in or out without having the wristband. So there are ways that we have explored.
Like to the parking area up top?
Right.
Or- Okay. Or like gating the whole turnaround?
Up top or?
Up top.
down?
To
Right.
drop off
In other
bikes.
words, there would be a gate there, so to get in or to get, well, in or out, you wouldn't need the code, but to get in, you would need a wristband that had the barcode on it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And,
But
you
that-
know-
But that sounds like that could be opening up a whole can of worms. How do people get these wristbands? I mean, it puts a lot on Parks' operation to make this work and to make it readily available for people.
Yeah, I go back to the point that, like, I think a lot of people who come to ride the gravity trails are not hurting for money. They don't mind paying
No,
the
they
shuttle fee is, like, pretty cheap for what they get. And I think a lot of people, we run into very few self-shuttlers. And as long as we have a system that, with signage and telling them where to be, that's, like, not going to inconvenience shuttle drivers, like, whether or not we
Yeah.
even collect the fee or whether we can police it, I'm kind of like, it's,
Well, initially, we had talked about not needing something like the automatic gate, but they would need wristbands. Now, how would they get the wristband? The booking software that we have does interface with different pieces of equipment, including a wristband kiosk that they put their money or their card in or however they're going to pay, and then it issues them a wristband, and if it's, requires a barcode, it'll print that. But initially, if we just require the wristbands, that's all we do right now. Yes, it's possible for somebody to cheat the system by not using the wristband, and that's happened, and when we catch it, those people are dealt with. So initially, that's what we're talking about, assuming that we're not going to need to police it with something like an automatic gate, because we'll see when people have wristbands or not. Our own shuttle drivers will be up there, and they're the ones that primarily report when they see somebody. For instance, if somebody was shuttling with a private shuttler and didn't have a wristband, then they report that to us, and that person gets.
I personally doubt we'll have too terribly many issues with
Yeah,
people
I
trying to
don't
cheat
think
the
so.
system. Like Sam said, these guys don't care that much. They just want to ride the downhill trails and have to pay $20, $30 to do it. They're going to shell that out and not even think about it. I do it all the time. I pay for the shuttle for even like 5 runs, without consideration, because it's not a giant chunk of money, and it helps the trails.
Yeah.
And most of those people are all about helping the trails out, so.
yeah.
Sounds good.
Cool. The good, I went into some details about what we'll need to do it and whatnot. I mean, the one thing that I probably need to bring up is the fact that I do recommend that we rent a bigger excavator than one we have. It'll just make everything that much more efficient and easy.
That'll save you a lot of time.
Yeah, I've sourced one that's $250 a day. And we don't get charged for the days that we're not using it. So it's, if we get a rain day or on the weekends, we're not getting charged for days that we're not
No, Scott can help you with that.
putting that into
Right.
use. So,
Is that something that has to go through the commission, or is?
No.
No.
Okay, good.
no.
If we were going to
just-
buy a
just-
new dump
just-
truck, yes.
Well, yeah.
Just
If it
letting you
went
know.
more.
Like, do we
Yeah.
have to approve to rent one?
Just letting you guys know, in case, yeah.
Thank you.
It
I don't
sounds
want
like
it to feel like it's all
low-cost
free
for a
and dandy
big
and,
game.
there'll be a few.
We've had enough complaints
Expenses.
about parking that I think this is a no-brainer. We should just do this.
Yeah, we will. It'll be on the agenda,
Cool.
too,
Well, I
I think.
think not. What,
Oh,
as
that's
I
right.
said
No, it
here,
doesn't. Sorry. I
the
was
talk was that
I'm on the price list thing.
you were indicating that
You don't
I
have,
really didn't need
you don't need to.
commission approval for this sort of thing.
No, you don't.
The reason it was on here is so we could get it out this evening. A couple of these issues, like the reopening a parking issue was, for instance, something that a commissioner had been very passionate about, and then others have expressed just the opposite. So I'm in this quandary in a couple of these issues that I'm getting competing, not instructions,
That's
but
right.
let's say feedback from the commission. So I figured
Yeah.
at a
Yeah.
workshop, tell you what we have going on, unless I hear otherwise, we
No,
don't plan
right,
on
that's your job, like
having a vote on
Yeah,
any
yeah,
of
Mark was
these.
saying, that's your
Good.
job to
Yeah,
make
Scott,
those
I
decisions.
appreciate that, because I was on the commission when it was closed, and it was not brought to us at all. I mean, I found out about it after the
Yeah.
fact. So I do appreciate you putting it out there.
Well, and this is the bigger, I'm not just like trying to pander to DH riders. I mean, the real passionate reason I have for wanting to create that parking spot is to be able to reopen the Miners Rock parking for people who want to park there. Because it's like, I mean, geez, how do you get to Miners Rock if you're a hiker these days? You got to park at the ball fields and hike, half a mile just to get to the trailhead, and then another half mile back. I mean, you just add an extra mile. But the only way to do that is by providing the DH users with something, a better location than that location. You know, because if you try to reopen that Miners Rock parking without opening up that DH lot, you're
All
just
the
going to
downhill
get.
riders are going to go there.
Yeah, I mean, and you can try to put up signs, you can try to enforce it, but like,
Won't
we
work.
just don't have the manpower to do that. And
Yeah.
so essentially that's the
like it.
reason why we're,
And the Miners Rock parking lot that he's talking about reopening, and that's on the third page, the one at the bottom that shows the telephone poles. Do you each have that?
I probably do. I'm
Yeah.
familiar with the lot,
Okay.
though.
You know, that was closed a year or so ago, based on a commissioner's, or possibly more than one commissioner, who wanted that closed, but we get weekly complaints about that being closed. And so it really does need to be reopened. But it's also something that I would like to see reserved for hikers only, that
Yeah.
we would put appropriate signage there, whether it says hikers only, or I don't know that you want to say no bikers. Anyway, the point is we want to keep that for hikers, so they have a more convenient way to access these trails
If we give the downhill riders a parking lot
up top.
up
right.
top,
Won't be a
there's
problem.
no reason we can't give hikers their own parking lot as well.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's our thinking, is that this is going to make this easier for the hikers especially. We're making it really easy for the bikers up top. I think people that drive in from out of town, they want to get on those trails immediately, so dropping them off up at the top makes a lot of sense, because they're not going to want to come down here and park. So I think it's going
And
to
they
be a
get
natural, it'll be a natural way of segregating the parking to where we shouldn't have a lot of bikers that are taking advantage of this. And a sign or two, hopefully they'll honor and respect that.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a lot easier to hike Miners Rock now with the bridge than it was before when that was first closed.
Yeah.
But it's still that section across the bridge and up. It's a narrow trail that's going to be shared by a lot of bikers, including some of the downhill. So I think it'll be nice to have people an option to avoid that.
Yeah.
When I was a second ago, I didn't say what I really meant to say. This will be on the website, right? Or someplace
already
posted
is.
someplace website. I mean, all these new things.
the other document.
Price list is, yeah.
Was, but we can have Stephen add it as well. I mean, this document.
So good, people will know about it. Good.
I think as far as parking, as I shared at the last meeting, this park represents by far the largest percentage of our park systems. And I'm not a biker, and I don't hike often enough, but that park should represent more than just those two entities. And there should potentially be festivals and all kinds of things happening in that park. And every time I mention that to somebody, they say, well, the number one issue, there's no place for people to park. So any place and every place in that park that we could figure out creatively to go in there and build parking without destroying trees, we should be doing that. We should be aggressive on figuring out how to expand parking in that entire park system. So I think this is great, and I just think we need to
Good.
figure out how to do it and
Good
put
feedback.
parking there so we can do things. And
This
that's
will be done in like a day.
Good.
What?
I
No,
don't
no,
mean,
what?
no, I mean,
One day.
excuse me, a day's worth of work.
No. I mean, the parking at the top will be
Yeah. Oh, that,
two
yeah.
weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the Miners Rock parking, I'll drive up there with the dump truck.
Right.
I will pick up the poles, I will
Yes.
put them on the trailer, and it's open.
Yeah.
Parking's
So-
a Eureka problem everywhere, not in the parks.
Yes.
Not just
Okay.
So before we
Anything
move on,
else?
can I, it's somewhat related to trails, can we just talk about the meeting on Friday, what that is, where we're meeting, what that's for?
Yeah, we'll meet at the playground, and then we're going to hike. Well, the plan was hopefully I don't know what's going to happen with all this rain.
I know.
I'd hate to hike trails when it's that wet. You know, if we're getting like 5 inches of rain on Wednesday and Thursday, I don't know if I recommend everyone stomping through the mud. So we might end up just hanging out at the playground area and talking and having a conversation, or maybe walking Beecham Trail. I mean, it's just a road, so it's not going to get, hammered by people walking on it. But the initial plan was to meet at the playgrounds at 3, then walk Fuller, and then go down to the bottom of the dam to show where that proposed bridge would go. But like I said, if that doesn't happen, then we can
It's
at
3
least.
o'clock Friday, 3 o'clock or 3:30?
Okay, I'm glad I asked, because I was,
Me or?
I'm glad I asked, because I thought we were meeting at Miners Rock, so I would have been missing you.
I posted on Facebook, the Eureka Springs Trails page, so just the agenda and all that. So.
Okay, I checked, I checked Scott's blog this morning, and there was nothing on it, so.
Okay.
Which is where I usually go to find information. So who runs the Eureka Springs Trails website?
Eureka Springs Trails
Trails.
Facebook page?
Facebook page, yeah.
You're looking at him, Sue.
Okay. So is this official Parks web Facebook page? Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I had stopped looking. That may have been the one I was going to, but I
You
stopped
should check
looking.
out my TikTok, too.
Okay.
No, I'm joking. I don't know.
No, there was the Facebook page I had was so long since anyone posted, I stopped checking it.
Yeah, there were like about 10 different pages and groups that I had to go through and get rid of because
Yeah, there've been multiple ones over
I
the
was
years.
just, it's, you can't keep track of, and people get confused, so,
Yeah,
but-
yeah. Well, I know Chris was posting on Facebook a lot of that when he was doing his tree walks, but that was 2019, and when I was looking recently, that site had never been updated since then.
Yeah, if anyone's, if anyone has a trails or any kind of parks-related event that they want posted to the Facebook page, like, just, let Scott know, and I can copy-paste and put it on there, so.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway, I just want to make sure it's clear that the walk on Friday is open to the public, right?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions about the parking? Or questions for Sam? We're good. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, thanks.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Sam?
Bye, Sam.
Bye. Okay, any other questions about the price list?
Well, I just wanted to point one thing out. The reason I did that price list was when you voted on the use of the ball fields, in short, not paying or not charging a fee for the ball fields for organized league sporting events. You said put it on this list, which I did. I do have, though, I don't know if we talked about this, $20 an hour for use of field lights. So if they're using the fields in the evening, those are expensive. It costs us about $20 an hour. And then use of the field for other than organized league sporting events. So if somebody wanted to have exclusive use of the field for, I don't know, some sort of large event, we would still charge for that. But the other thing that I added that is totally new is on the first page where, and this will be for discussion at the next meeting, next regular meeting, was, as Sam just mentioned, we have explored the idea of a self-shuttling fee, or whether it was a downhill trail use fee, which I understand there might be some issues with calling it that, but do we charge for self-shuttlers? Sam did look into what some other like bike parks are doing, and I spoke with Dustin Slaughter as well, who operates in a number of different venues. And they both seem to indicate that, for instance, for somebody who's self-shuttling, and this is someone who has their own van or their own car and a bike rack, and they may have 2 or 4 bikes. Usually it's 2. It's pretty typical. And somebody's driving them up, dropping them off, and then waiting down at the bottom. And there's no fees for that currently. So in reality, our trails need to be maintained, and we're using our shuttle services to pay for that. But there's a huge loophole in the self-shuttlers that don't pay anything, but are putting as much wear and tear on those trails as somebody who's paying for a shuttle. So I would like it discussed before we finalize this price list at the next regular meeting. I think we do need to have a discussion on that. And again, this is something that by our rules, you have to establish fees. I can't. So that's why I am mentioning this now.
That's
It
true.
would have to
That one
be.
is explicitly
That one is
listed.
explicit.
We get to
Explicit.
establish fees, yes.
So the point is, I think that people who are using those trails need to be paying for the trails. And as Sam said, it's more than just the trails, it's the turnarounds and all the rest of that. And as he also mentioned, and it's a fact, that those are the ones that tend to park illegally and all the rest of that. So there's a disincentive for them to use the shuttles when they have to pay for them, and they can self-shuttle for free. So we're just trying to level the playing field and make sure that people are paying for their use of, or I should say, for their wear and tear on the trails that are, that we have to pay for Monday morning to go get them back up and running.
Are shuttles always running if the trails are open?
No, not at all.
So what about when shuttles are not running?
Well,
Do we
that's,
still charge the fee? I
well,
would imagine.
there is a private shuttle operator,
Okay.
Slaughter Enterprise, or Slaughter Trail Guides, and they are often open, or they are often running on the weekdays. We only run ours on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And so there's not, and that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
Ruth and I were talking about
Yeah.
that today. There's some
enough
issues
staff
there
to do
that
that.
we may revisit. Overall, it's operating well. We make a fair amount of money, so does Slaughter. He's out there running when we're not.
Yeah,
So obviously, he wouldn't be doing it if he's not benefiting from it.
of course.
But we are not running on those weekdays, but he is generally.
Okay.
Can we go back to the lights?
Yes.
So the soccer league, are they currently paying for lights?
They don't use the lights.
They don't use the lights. So is anybody currently typically using the lights?
No, there was somebody a year ago that wanted to do a Frisbee golf sort of a thing, and they were using the lights.
Sometimes they have, and in the past, there have been people that have had events over in the main part of the park that have wanted to do something there, that have asked about lights. There used to be an adult men's league that paid for lights. There even used to be it was like an honor system thing where they would just come tell us they used the lights and bring the money kind of thing, with some of the families and things went down there at night.
Well, and the last one was supposed to be that way, but
Right.
we never seem to have gotten anyone
No.
in with their $20.
No.
I think light fees are very normal for cities. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a very common thing. I'm kind of in a gray area on this private shuttle situation, in the fact that if it's a public park, if I were riding my bike from Rogers to Eureka and just came to that park and said, I want to ride this, it's a public park, and I'm not requiring any shuttle, or if my kids and I wanted to go over to the park and they're going to play in the playground and somebody's going to drop me off, and I'm just kind of, is it public park or is it not public park? You know, we don't charge them to hike. Do we charge them? So I don't know. It becomes real gray there.
And I would answer that by saying this. First of all, we wouldn't be charging just for somebody coming and biking. If they're doing cross-country biking, we're not charging a fee for that, nor do I think, at least I would never propose it. That's just like hiking a trail. When you're talking about the downhill, though, it is that shuttling that takes place. Now, there are those who will pedal uphill. One of our commissioners does that frequently, I know. So they're not shuttling. But when they get to where they're using their vehicle and using the same turnarounds that our shuttles use, they get in the way. They're actually not supposed to be using those shuttle turnarounds, but they do anyway. So it's really for getting in that queue and throwing that wrench in the work, so to speak,
Right.
where it's the use of those turnarounds and all of that is the real issue.
Yeah.
So having the private shuttles kind of minimizes the congestion with self-shuttlers and everything, or?
No, by private shuttles, or you mean the self-shuttlers or someone like Dustin?
Like Slaughter.
Okay. That's one, or sometimes they'll run two. But
running that.
But running
helps
that
cut
is
down
not
on
the same-
self-shuttlers and like a bunch of little vehicles.
yeah, that's not the same as 8 or 10 people who are coming in and out repeatedly.
Yeah.
So it is a big difference. It's a matter of, we have one private company now that's running shuttles, and then we run usually just one, sometimes two. So that's That's 2 or 3 shuttles versus 8 or 10 people in vehicles that are doing it. So that's why, in my view, if they're using all of those shuttle facilities that we're providing and that are costly to maintain, then they should be paying for the use of them.
Now, the company that is doing their own shuttling and charging people for it, they pay us.
We
Right.
get $5 per wristband.
Okay.
So there's 2 ways to go. If you're going to charge for self-shuttling, there's 2 possible ways of doing it. Number one, you can do a per person. It could be just the $5 wristband, just like what they use as it is now. We get $5 for that per person, per biker. Or it could be just per vehicle. And that's, I think Sam had mentioned $30 per vehicle. That's the amount that's been suggested as reasonable. So that way, whether they have 2 bikes on a rack or 4, you can't really get much more than that.
And if it's the same price as the other shuttle, that would probably dissuade them from even doing it themselves, and they'll just get on our shuttle.
Well, the difference being is if they're doing self-shuttling and they're paying by the car, and let's say they have to, then it's really only costing them $15 per person.
Yeah. I see.
Whereas if they use our shuttles, they're paying $30 per person.
Yeah.
So it's a little different, but it's still a disincentive to self-shuttle if they know that they can pay $30 and just be catered to or save a few dollars in self-shuttle. Time will tell, but I would assume that it's going to discourage some of the self-shuttling if they're going to have to pay something for it.
So Scott, this was a while ago when Dave Remco was here.
Yes.
There was a discussion about how he was riding each of those trails weekly just to check that they were in shape and there weren't any problems. Is that something that's still happening, for the downhill?
I believe Sam is still doing that. He looks like he's gone, but that's supposed to be happening.
Yeah, okay. So
I've
yeah,
gone
just,
with him on several of those rides, too.
Yeah.
yeah. So I just want to point out that's something you wouldn't normally do for normal cross-country hiking, biking trails.
no,
It is specific to the downhill and the extra expenses that are involved,
Right.
which is part of the reason for these fees in that area and not in other areas.
Exactly. Right. Yeah,
More
we
work,
don't
more
charge,
danger.
nor do I ever anticipate we'll charge for somebody who just wants a cross-country bike ride. It's there's a lot going on to do that shuttling, and it's constantly going, and in my view, people should be paying for those facilities.
I'm having a hard time with that. I can't wrap my head around picking and choosing who's going to pay for parking and shuttling, and either everybody has to use our shuttle or you don't. But I mean, for example, I go kayaking at Sugar Gap, and we have a choice. They can take us in and put us in and bring us back to our car, or we can have somebody go take the car back and pick us up, and they don't charge us more for that. And that's not even a public park. So this is a public park. I can go park my car there all day long and go do anything I want to all day long around the park, everything else, and I'm not getting charged to do anything. The downhill folks, if they have a van, and I get your point, don't get me wrong, but how you really equitably do that across the board for everybody who's not using our shuttle specifically has to pay. There's no way around it at all times. Unless you have a gate, unless you have some real way to monitor it, it just seems to me, until we're really ready to do that, we shouldn't be doing it.
But to me, a self-shuttler has a choice. They can pay to be shuttled, or they can walk up the hill, pull in their bike, or they can drive up the hill.
That's the
So it's not, we're not
reasoning, is
forcing
climb
them to
the hill.
pay. They can pedal up the hill.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's the trick, is to block in any way we can access for them to get with a vehicle to the top, so that they're paying a convenience charge to make life easier.
Or
And
where
I
the
think for what
turnaround
there's
is, where the turnaround is, where they cannot access the turnaround
Exactly.
part. And maybe so it doesn't do them any good to have somebody come down if they still can't get all the way to the turnaround to
Right.
load the bikes and everything to get them back up. Maybe that's the one area you monitor and keep people out.
Yeah.
That was the
Except for
idea,
people
right?
who-
But if they then would have the option to go down to the baseball fields, and it would be hard to stop them from pulling in there.
true.
Well, this
Yeah,
has
but-
come up because there's at least one commissioner who believes very strongly there should be no self-shuttling whatsoever. And I can't, as a director, I don't have the authority to make that decision. That has to be a vote. Again, it's real clear that when it comes to fees and those sorts of things, that has to be a commission vote. But the point is, what you're saying right now is exactly what at least one other commissioner has expressed, that there should be no self-shuttling. Because again, part of our problem is there are so many. You get all these vehicles and they park illegally, and it is a problem. So that might be what you as a commission chooses, is to say there won't be any self-shuttling. For $15, $30,
So-
none.
In that spirit, that means there has to be an option always for them to get back up, right? I mean,
Right.
either
mean,
we
we have to
have
run
one
our
running
shuttle
or
all
somebody
the
else has something running.
Right.
So are we prepared to make that happen also?
Well, that's another, like I said, there's a lot of moving parts here.
I think-
There's somebody who in the past had responded to a request for proposals to be the sole shuttling service and that we would get out of that business. I frankly would, for many reasons, wouldn't mind seeing that, as long as we could work out a proper deal. We would have to do a new request for proposals on that and see, because it would have to be an open bid sort of
It's hard to
process.
staff the shuttles.
But it is. We right now have a difficulty.
And not only that, we have experience and we have a little history, I guess, now with the
Yes.
money-making proposition of that
Yes.
for somebody else, right?
Yes.
Where maybe before we didn't.
Do y'all mind if we let Chris Fisher speak?
Oh, yeah.
Please.
Chris?
I'm really glad to hear you guys going over the nuts and bolts of shuttle and mountain bike and Miners Rock and that area of the park. And the reason I'm really glad to hear that you're dwelling on this for several minutes is because I have to point out to you that when the Gravity Trail project was launched with the permission of the Parks Commission, there was no discussion of a shuttle aspect whatsoever. The trails were designed, evidently, at that point, with a return ride that the bikers would somehow get back up to these magical hubs. And then there was a new development on the ridge where we'll scrape off that so that that could be a place where shuttles could come and go. Then there was down below by the entry road, shuttle stuff, parking stuff, never included in the plan that was developed with the Waltons. So 3-4 years later, now we're trying to figure out, what do you do with all that activity? And to your comments, Mark, somebody has to pay for that service to get those bikers up there because they're not willing to pedal their way back up, because they want to do 7 trips in an hour or 14 trips in 2 hours. That's the nature of the game. So without being nasty, I have to point my finger at the Waltons and say, you thought Eureka was just going to provide endless free shuttles? And the mountain bikers would be terribly appreciative of that because we would provide that service from what? The revenue that the biking community would bring to Eureka Springs that would trickle through the tax collection and then get into the park's budget somehow was going to pay for that? So now here you are a few years later going, all right, so how do we really clarify this? We're talking about gates and bracelets and the whole mechanics of a discussion that was missing 4 years ago. So I'm really grateful to hear it. That's all I wanted to.
I think, Chris, too, I want to add what you said is great. In the beginning, they did pay for our shuttle, and they insisted that we have a shuttle.
Oh,
And they paid for it. It was part of the original plan. I think I forget the details. We could look it up,
Right.
I'm sure. Say 6 months, say, I don't remember what the actual time was. But then when it ran out, then we were supposed to start paying it. And I think it even gradually went from them paying half to us paying a quarter. You know, it went like that. That's when we made the decision to take it back all in-house, and we also went with, let's try to go out-of-house, because we made those decisions when it became 100% our responsibility to pay for shuttles.
Right.
Before that, they were. But I also remember in the beginning with the shuttle, what very little downhill I've done, I'm not that brave, and I haven't ridden much in the last few years when I was younger, 10 years ago, whatever. But the original fake downhill we had at Lake Leatherwood a long time ago, I did ride on that a couple times. I never heard of people shuttling. I wasn't that experienced at it. It wasn't as high-tech as it is now. Of course you went to the back and top of the hill. You made yourself get up there somehow. And I think in the beginning of our downhill trail, it was the same way here. A lot more people seemed willing at the very beginning and expected that they would have to get themselves back up, to pedal up, walk up, something. And as that industry changed, they started expecting the shuttles more. I think that has changed. And so maybe the Waltons, they were remiss and not, because they knew certainly more than we did about it, the trailblazers, et cetera, I'm sure. But it was also part of the culture of the downhill. It wasn't as, I think, prevalent as it was 6 months later or whatever.
Yeah, not only that, but the bikes have changed too. Like, I've got a lot of friends who ride downhill bikes, and you legitimately cannot ride them uphill.
Oh, yeah.
That's
true,
It's
they have.
way too heavy, the gearing's wrong.
Yeah, they're heavy. I forgot,
You
they're
can't
very
ride
heavy.
it. Yeah.
Well, I, for one, I'm going to make it a point to go so I have a visual of exactly what's going on, the whole process. And in my head, I'll have a better idea of what you're talking about, what everybody's talking about, as far as where the shuttles are going, what parking lots they're taking up, you know, who's being displaced because of all this activity.
I'm happy to take
Because I would like to understand it better, a little better before I made any more judgment on it.
Mark, could I also interject too that while you're discovering the behind-the-scenes aspects of the Miners Rock scenario, I would encourage a lot of people to consider hiking down the downhill trails themselves, not on a busy weekend, but they avail you an experience that you're not going to get in other parts of the park. And it's almost a shame that hikers aren't able to take those routes, because they take you through some pretty amazing locations that I don't think the bike folks can even look sideways for 2 seconds.
Right.
So
That's a good point. And I would like to do that, actually.
I would suggest you take them downhill as opposed to climbing them,
Yeah.
by the way. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris.
Chris.
Well, and the last thing I would say on this is that, I mentioned the planning committee, or some of you did as well, but I'll get back to the trails committee, is these sorts of things are things, even though we're talking about shuttles, it's still things that a trails committee could hammer out all the details and then make recommendations to the commission, so we don't have these lengthy meetings, and presumably bikers and hikers both would be on that trails committee. So think through all of those issues.
Bikers,
I really
hikers,
encourage you.
birders, people like that, everybody that uses the trails. We forget about bird watchers and people like that,
Oh,
too, like you
birders. I
said.
thought you said murders.
Murders, birders, birders.
Maybe they're watching the crows.
Hey, Scott, on the subject of fees, are the rest of the fees that are on this thing current fees?
Yes, the ones that I highlighted in yellow were the only changes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to look at Pat's email quickly, because she did say, please share these. Oh, she did say she agreed with the comments I made in the last email about emailing each other. I think we should work on that, and we can discuss that with emails or something to each other. And that email that I sent about communicating with each other and not sending random emails all
Yes.
week long, everybody kind of said, yes, we agree, we don't, Pat kind of chimed in on it too. I think we could work on a system where we coordinate how we could with him and with each other.
Well,
He's in agreement, we need to.
Yeah, let me just say this. I think the way that tends to start is I'll send documents out, and I send it to the whole commission. So I send it to 7 of you. And then all it takes is one of you to respond all, or reply all, and that goes out to everybody. And then one of you reads what that person said, and I only respond when I get that, when one of you responds, to try to avoid the group emails. I'll only respond to the one person that asked a follow-up question. That was requested long ago. People didn't want to be involved in group emails. So that's what I will do unless otherwise.
I think it's good.
asked.
And if we make an effort, when we have an individual question for you after some information, especially if it's a quick question that can be answered with a
Right.
quick email.
So the best thing to prevent that is, because I do, if I'm sending documents out, they go to all of you. So if you have something to follow up on, just send that to me separately in a separate email. Or do a reply instead of reply all. And then other commissioners aren't getting in the loop. Because the problem is...
Weeding through some of these to decide which one was...
No, yeah, it's too much. If you have an individual question, you should just go do it separately.
Yeah, I think I was partly to blame here because I sent out an email, replied to an email for everybody, but it was around that particular meeting and if it was going to be set up as a commission meeting with FOIA, and so that affected everybody. We all needed to know whether we needed to come to that meeting or not. So I didn't do it without, I'm sorry if I did it wrong, but I didn't do it without thinking
No, your
about
example
it.
doesn't really fit quite because you were as Secretary of Planning things, you needed to plan things, that's different, but
Yeah.
it was just an example of how it can happen, because it's happened multiple times over other times. No, you're in that position, but still, like you said, separating it in different emails would be nice, communicating with each other, making an effort too, if you have something that requires a lot of time or information from Scott, to make an appointment with him. Remember, I meet with him on Tuesdays, so if you have questions you think that are not priority, that can wait, you can say, hey, Ruth, ask him about this, and then I can get back with you, or we can make plans you can make plans to talk to him later or something. I think it will help him to plan his time better, too, if he doesn't have so many long answers to deal with. The short answers are one thing, but I think and with each other, too. Okay. And that was Pat's thoughts, too, so I think we're all in agreement there. Anything else on our list that we're not missing, or that we're missing, rather? I can't speak today, not missing.
No, there was just one last thing, item 6.
Where is it?
Discussion of contracts for architectural and
Oh, yeah.
engineering for Basin Park. And I'll make that real quick. You might recall at our last meeting, there was a contract for engineering at Basin Park. I think it was Commissioner Rulli that then asked, well, I don't see in here how this engineering firm would coordinate with other design or other consultants in general. And that took me by surprise for a moment. I'm like, yeah, how does that work? And it wasn't until I went back and looked at even the request for proposals and then the contract itself. And that's that this first phase is assessment only. In this first phase of what this contract is, it's the engineers going in and assessing what the problems are and creating an as-built. So at this stage, and I've confirmed that with the discussion with them, is, yeah, they don't anticipate it for this contract coordinating with anyone other than us, because at this point, it's just an as-built, an assessment of different things that may or may not need to be fixed. So they were of the mindset that they didn't really need language like that in there. They did agree that the next phase of the contract, where we're actually starting to put some prospective plans together, that yes, well, let me say this, they have engineers, they have landscape architects, they have everything that we would need to design the Basin Park, except for they don't have structural architects. So for the band shell, we would be using a different architect. So yes, there would be coordination there, but that won't be till the next phase of the contract. I think also when we discussed that, I think, Sue, you had asked, I believe, about the rate, the rates.
Yeah.
Which I did email to all of you.
Yes, I got that.
And I emailed something else in that same email. I don't recall what it was.
But just to clarify, on that contract, though, those are the rates, but you have maximum amounts
Yes.
on each of those. So
Right.
they may have, that could be a configuration of a million different things.
Yes.
But that's the max it's going to cost for each
Yes.
one of those sections.
Correct. So we would like to have that on the agenda for the next regular meeting to see if we can get them started. That Basin Park has taken so long to get an engineer that wanted to handle it, and we need to get that rolling.
Okay.
And that, unless
good.
any of you have questions, would be the end of this meeting. But will there be a regular meeting? I have to be out of town.
that's right.
During the next regular meeting. I can come.
Just
I
send
can
us your
call in by
director's report,
Zoom,
or send your director's report,
Okay.
and I'll print it, and we can read
Okay.
it. How's that?
Okay, fine.
Okay. Is that okay?
I'm out of town, too.
Just keep the date.
Just, Yeah, can I make a couple comments?
Sure.
First off, I would really like to see us sooner than not figure out the master plan committee. I think that's extremely important. And the other thing, this may or may not be able to be handled in a single meeting. Maybe it needs a couple of months. But I really think that we all need to agree how to give you authority to do certain things without having to come to this. I think that's so important. It seems so minor, but it's huge. You
huge.
can't be held accountable if you got to come running to us on every single thing.
Thank you, Brent. And that's important, and it's really been
It's
noticing a lot lately, and I've been spending a lot of time reading Rogers and Harrison and Batesville and talking to state-level parks commissioners and getting some information about how do you define what the role of the commissioners, the role of the director, and the relationships, because it's kind of muddled here.
Yeah.
And when you read our bylaws and rules, it doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes. And the precedents that have been set don't make any sense either. So yes, it'd be really nice to have some way to continually work on that, and that could be part of planning too, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think the way you handle things and the way the prior commissioner chairperson handled things is very different.
And it's always, it's always that way. Each one kind of goes back and forth.
It may be good to have something so it's not going to swing so much between every time the chairperson changes.
Yeah, Scott's job should not change completely every time there's a change in chair. I mean,
And it's because you don't always know when you're, Kevin did things when he was chair that he thought needed to be done because, he also, we just went through different times where there have been, who knows who's doing what. And so sometimes you take on things or don't take on things. I mean, I've seen times years ago where the chair did everything and the director didn't get to do much at all. And it kind of goes back and forth when the director stands up and says, no, I want to, but it still was never written down or decided.
Right.
So I think this would be a good time to make that part of the master planning. I'm glad you brought that up, Bren. Okay. And yeah, it will take a while. And while we're at it, we all do our homework to think about these committees and think about what you want to be involved in and think about trails and recruiting people. The Trails Committee is a great place for people. I'm hoping Sharon will be involved with it because she has so much knowledge, and you get some knowledgeable people on there, and some people who know about our parks and know about, and then hopefully some people that aren't so knowledgeable. Maybe they're disinterested. You kind of recruit people that you.
Yeah.
We kind of make some more of the public involved with it. That'd be great.
What would that committee be composed of? Like a commissioner?
A commissioner, but then the committee itself can have its own chair. It doesn't have to be the commissioner.
Okay.
And the commissioner should attend, but the commissioner supposedly doesn't have to, but I think you should. And then at the actual meeting, the commissioner that's attached to it would do the report and/or call up the person, have them help you, whatever.
Okay.
But then
There's only one commissioner on that committee, though? Okay.
There can be others, but if there's two or more, then it just has to be
It becomes a public
published in
meeting.
advance. So
Okay.
let's say there was a topic that was going to be discussed, and you were not on that committee, but you wanted to go to that committee meeting, you would just need to let us know in advance so we could have it published. Kim
Yeah.
Stryker handles all that, but
Oh, okay.
You can announce it.
usually, I'm the one that'll prompt it.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd
Sorry,
be
just
great.
had a
I'd love
question.
to see that committee get going again. Carmen did a nice job, I think, with getting a good report and getting organized, and there was a good variety of people that were involved with it back then, and it really helped to have all the feedback.
There's the need for the transparency that the public wants and commissioners want, and then there's the balance of that and your time as volunteers, that don't want to have 3-hour meetings. But those committees go a long way, I think, to streamlining that because they hash all that out in meetings and then come and make recommendations.
And they have a defined period. It's not forever. It's
Right.
Right.
until the mission's accomplished,
Yeah,
hopefully.
yeah, that's good. No, I think it's good to get that going again. Okay, anything else? All right, I guess we're done. We are adjourned with our workshop.
This one's mine, right?
Sharon, did you want to say anything to us today?
I've got a copy. So.
Don't mind if I let Sharon say something?
No.
Since I did point her out several times, I feel like I should let her speak if she wants to.
I'm very excited about hearing about committees because I think that we've had successful committees and commissioners who were on those committees that were very involved and excited to hear from public people. And I'm very excited that the long-range planning committee might get just
Okay, thanks, Sharon. Okay, we are adjourned unless y'all have anything else?
Thank you.
Good, okay. 7:35, thank you.